Hello and welcome to Rogue Artisans and Crafters, two-time winner of the Southern Oregon Television Awards for Best Arts and Culture Show. I'm your host, Glamour Dave Nienow. We welcome you, our viewer, to our new season of 2019 shows where we feature local artists and craftspeople here in Southern Oregon, and we talk to our featured artists about how they came to their art, what drives them as artists, find out stories behind their art process, and how their work as artists influences their lives. So today we have the privilege of featuring local artist Lane Hall. Lane is an artist who explores our local landscapes in a variety of media that includes oils, watercolors, and graphite and mixed media. I discovered Lane Hall early in the development of this show during my online searches for local artists, and apparently Lane and I went to school together, but since I had 2 brain surgeries while a senior in high school, I can't remember anything from my school days. So today I am pleased to talk to Lane Hall about his life as an artist and the work that he pursues today with his art, and so we welcome Lane to the show.
Thank you, David. It's nice to be on the show.
Yeah. So, when I discovered you online, of course, at the time, I couldn't remember that we ever knew each other.
Right.
But I was very much impressed with the full range of media that you do, and that you've, not only have you done a lot of great work, but you're also an award-winning artist. You've won numerous awards for your work. So, to begin with, how long have you been doing your work as an artist, and what brought you to doing the work that you're doing?
Well, I have to go back, as far as taking a pen and scribbling as a kid.
Yeah.
2-3 years old, drawing race cars. I was raised with drag racing in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And so I would be down on the floor with lined paper and just scribbling away. I also did a lot of, action figures, and I think I had my teachers worried because some of those action photos had some blood and guts. Hopefully turned out okay, but I have explored a lot of different media over the years, and started out transparent watercolor on paper. Let's say, late 80s I started getting more serious about it. And of course, that was just after college. I started college in 1981, got my Bachelor of Fine Arts degree, and graduated in 1986. So then I was focusing on watercolor primarily.
Right.
And one of the things that the college professor had us do one time was put gesso, which is like an acrylic paint, on just poster paper.
Yeah.
And this was during a life drawing class, which is figure drawing. I took 9 terms of that to learn how to draw better.
Yeah,
because
right.
drawing the figure is very difficult. It was a challenge, but I used a stiff brush to apply that gesso to the poster paper.
Yeah.
And then when you run a pencil over it, the little, if you looked at it under a microscope, it'd be a ridge.
Yes, right, because you're actually putting an indentation of stroke into that surface.
Correct.
Right.
And you get some wonderful surfaces.
Yeah.
Well, I did that, got out of college, and stayed with watercolor.
Yeah.
I was admitted into the Watercolor Society of Oregon in 1991, and I was still doing transparent watercolor on paper. No treatment of the paper.
Right. Okay.
And that's just no gouache, no acrylic. And did that for a long time. It's been, I say more recently, like maybe 2007 or so. I was hiking one day, and this is literal. Stopped in my tracks, and I thought, I remember my college professor and gesso on paper. So why can't I do that again? So I experimented with various surfaces.
Yeah.
Then I thought, a lot of galleries don't like glass. And I was focusing on galleries outside the Rogue Valley, particularly in the Southwest. And I used to facetiously is what I'm trying to say that they were afraid of glass. Just were afraid of the breakage.
Yeah.
So I thought, why can't we spray some kind of board after we put after I put pencil on it over the gesso with something real bad for you, and it would just, fix it to the board. Yeah. So I did that. I did gessoed board with a cradled edge, similar to this, except different medium, and the cradle acts as a frame.
Yeah.
And I got some interesting effects. Same type of thing with the paper. You got you bring the pencil over the rough area created by the gesso. Did this for a number of years, Southwest art scenes, or Southwest scenes rather. And sometimes I put watercolor over the board. It's not the greatest substrate for watercolor, in my opinion. I think, for me, paper is the best substrate. So that got me into this mixed media, I call it.
Right.
And I was still doing transparent watercolor paper for competitions, and such. So, yeah.
Well, I know that, from my own limited experience in dealing with watercolor and talking to other incredibly more experienced, advanced watercolor artists, I mean, there are a wide variety of paper types designed for watercolor paints.
Right.
So, so the selection of paper is like a key element to whatever image and effects that you're trying to create in the image that you're trying to create via watercolor paint.
Yeah.
So it seems to be an area that offers a wide variety of experimenting between the types of watercolor paints and the various types of papers that are out there. And there seems to be like a wide variety of papers out there.
Yeah, there are, and you said it very well. There are what they call cold press, which is a toothed paper, and I'm assuming it's in a press that isn't hot. There's hot press, and my assumption is and I could be wrong, but in the factory it's so hot that it actually creates a smooth surface, or relatively smooth.
Yeah. In the past, when I dealt in airbrush, I mean, the choice of cold press or hot press kinds of paper, boards was a choice that you would make that would affect the various inks that you're using through the airbrush. Right. So I've dealt with that a little bit. So
I think and the effects between the different papers have a slightly different tooth. Yeah. And it would be hard to notice unless you got close, maybe. But it definitely is worth experimenting.
For most people in everyday life, they have zero thought to types of paper, right? Paper is paper,
right? That's
right.
Yeah.
But until you actually become an artist, and then you find that there's this world of unique paper types and surface types and everything. And so it is kind of an amazing world out there just when you're doing that subject.
Oh, absolutely. And I think especially now there are so many different materials available. I always say the masters would go crazy.
Right.
And for every medium, I think there are many substrates and even more mediums. I worked at the Craft Warehouse locally here as a picture framer for a while, and I couldn't keep all of the materials straight, and people would ask me, pins, how many different pins can you make?
Yeah, exactly right.
And it's endless, and so it makes for very interesting experimentation if you want to branch out into within your medium, even different substrates. Even with these oils, I have 1, 2, 3 different, 4 substrates represented here. Yeah. So there you go.
Yeah. I mean, it's an amazing. It never ceases to amaze me the level of human ingenuity in creating an endless variety of variations on anything. Yeah. Right. And Central Arts in downtown Medford is like an amazing place to walk into to see the sheer variety of papers and inks and chalks and just all the different types of media out there. Yeah, it's an amazing thing. It for me, I sometimes think about trying to get into doing some art again beyond my photography that I did for several years. But I walk into Central Arts and I'm like, my mind goes overboard trying to figure out what I should do. You know?
Which room do I go in? Well, there's the upstairs and downstairs, but absolutely, I understand. I'm like a kid in a candy store, and I don't even venture into every every aisle. I don't have to. I still am amazed at one aisle. So absolutely, you said it well.
Now, you've done a lot of the work that you, in terms of your subject matter, is locally oriented.
Right.
Yeah, and you've talked about going out and doing plein air kinds of work. Yeah. So you're like doing your work on location.
Correct. Yes, it is, and I find it very challenging. And the light changes. I think I read somewhere every 7 minutes.
Yes.
You have to kind of there are techniques plein air painters use to make it simpler. Right. But you still have to deal with, wind is a I don't want to say enemy of the plein air painter, but it is an issue. Yeah. Mosquitoes, dust. So it's difficult besides just the changes in the light.
Yes.
But for me, it's made me a better artist in a sense, and at least being able to execute quicker and with more creativity, and that's a difficult thing to explain, actually, why.
Yes, well,
but I think it has.
When you're where you're really exploring a variety of media types in the work that you do, I mean that you're in a state of kind of always experimenting.
Correct.
Right. So, but that can't help but in the very long term really enhanced your talent and skill set as an artist.
I think so, and also I appreciate that. It can also, and it has for me, what's the word I want to look for here? It can produce something wonderful. In other words, I might discover something. Yes. Not necessarily a new medium, but substrate. Oh, yes. I really like this. Yes. For example, this one in the center, that's the first time I've used that surface.
Right.
That's aqua board, which is made for water media. But it's very absorbent, and though the paint doesn't move, I like aspects of it. You know, so it has a different texture than, say, this or the one behind me.
Right.
So with experimenting, at least with different surfaces, you might discover, wow, I really like this, and look what this does. You know? So I think I could be called an experimental artist in some sense.
Yeah.
You know, there is a society or something.
Yes, there is.
For experimental artists, I think that's the name.
Yeah.
Of it. So.
And one of my past guests, Linda Hoffman Snodgrass.
Oh yes.
You know, she is like part of that society, and her technique and approach that she does in her watercolor work is experimental. And we had a bit of discussion about what constitutes experimental art. You know,
that's a good question.
And that was an interesting discussion. And and she does some really wonderful kinds of unique imagery with the approach that she does.
Yeah.
And it's always cool to see. I like to see artists that are like really kind of trying to push their own boundaries in developing and expanding their skill set and exploring whatever idea that comes to them.
Yeah,
you know?
Absolutely. Yeah. And you can do that in so many ways and within your genre.
Yes.
I mean, it's endless how you can, let's just say as a landscape painter, paint the landscape with many different techniques and still make it believable.
Yeah.
You know, maybe not necessarily photographic, but but even in that, every photorealist has its own style. So, you know, or his or her own style. So.
Yeah. Now, since a lot of the work that you do that's kind of locally focused in terms of locations, I mean, what kind of like are among your favorite locations that you like to go out and really that kind of give you inspiration?
They're very, very local because many times I don't want to drive that far, or I'll joke and say the starving artist doesn't have a lot of gas in his tank, you know, to get somewhere. But seriously, I try to find places that I'm not going to be, that doesn't have a lot of traffic, both you know, foot traffic or vehicle traffic. And I've discovered some local places, and one of them here off of Beeson Lane, I discovered, which I've done several paintings from. You know, some represented today.
Yeah.
And so I like things that have. Well, I'm doing a theme right now called Remnants. It's for a show in September.
Okay.
And so anything that reminds me of my childhood here in Oregon before I moved up here with my family. As a kid, my grandparents on my mom's side, they had to make a long story short, had a place out off of Ross Lane. Changed immensely, and you wouldn't recognize it now.
Yeah.
But I think the old barns, the old orchards remind me of that.
Yeah.
Gives me a good feeling, good memories, and so anything attached to that, it doesn't have to have a building in it, but anything that reminds me of that, it really interests me. And so it doesn't have to be a landmark.
Yeah.
In fact, I don't focus on them. If everybody were painting Mount McLaughlin, I might focus on the irrigation ditch. So, you know, that's those places that have been my favorites have been local places. I frequented Jacksonville a lot the last few years, painting in watercolor and water media on location. So I hope to get out there again with the oils, which I'm focusing on now. So.
And now, like when you're out at a location and you're working on whatever it is you're depicting, are you able to generally complete your work in a single setting, or do you typically need to like do follow up at the same location, or do you like, because like some artists will like maybe not do a completed plein air piece
Right.
in one sitting, and they just kind of like go back to their studio and kind of do a finish up from their memory or from pictures they may have taken. So what's your typical approach in that kind of circumstance?
I'll have to say that typically I don't finish in one session. I'll either go back, one session or two sessions, but I take photos as I'm working with different two or three photos as the day progresses as I'm working in plein air, and then that way I can go back in the studio and tweak it.
Right.
I would say once in a while I'll finish it on location. I get all the basic colors down, and maybe 50 to 75% of it done if you want to, on location, and then go back in the studio. There's nothing wrong with being what they call a plein air purist. They would say 75% has to be done in plein air.
Yeah.
And so it may not be considered necessarily plein air at that point, but it starts there.
Right.
And I've got all the colors down, and usually my memory serves me well enough that even if my little camera didn't get a great photo, then I can complete it. And it's very satisfying because when I take them in the studio, then I can make it a gallery-ready painting, hopefully.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we got a few images of your work that the control room can bring up, and we'll talk about some of those images.
Okay, you betcha.
All righty.
All right.
Okay, so what are we looking at here?
This is a piece called Foothills Remnant.
Okay.
And originally was going to go to this into this show in September that I'm doing with a theme called Remnants. That show will be at the in Jacksonville. But this was off of Foothills, let's see, well, not Foothills Road, but the Foothills east of Talent.
Okay.
And that is transparent watercolor. And I did a pencil drawing, very careful pencil drawing with that, which is often very characteristic of the way I work in watercolor, especially when I'm working on a barn or something. Right. It could be finished in this case, and in many of the pieces that you'll see in this slideshow, it could have been finished as a black and white drawing, and then I basically put the color in and work it. So
okay,
yeah.
All right, so let's go on to the next.
This one here is just simply graphite or pencil, if you will, on a board similar to the one behind me, but larger. I think it was called clay board, and so I gesso over the clay board to get those marks that I was speaking of, and it may be hard to see from looking at it now, but this is an old boat on dry dock and called Angelina. And I named it Angelina's Repose, and it just recently sold over in a gallery at the coast.
Oh, okay.
So I was very delighted to hear that.
All right, cool.
And it was a 24 by 36 piece.
Yeah, okay. All right, let's go on to the next.
This is a recent plein air oil that I did one November, just about froze to death, and it was racing the weather. And this one recently sold also. This is a gessoed surface with... as you can see some of the paint, you can see the gesso marks in there. And I took a palette knife there in the lower right-hand side. You see those dark marks.
Yeah.
That was created with the palette knife. And what I had left over on the palette, I mixed together and made this gray and decided to try experimenting, running the palette knife over those marks. And I thought, maybe they could be weeds or something.
Yeah, right.
So I left it in the painting. And it was a cold November day. I called it November Mood. Okay. This was a little tiny piece, about 9 by 12.
Yeah. All right. Let's go on to the next.
This particular piece is on panel. It's called Fall. Very recent oil painting near my home in Talent. And this was a studio piece. I did it from a photograph. And what really attracted me to this was from the photo. In the photo, the mountains had this wonderful gray look, and was just really attracted to those mountains. Even though I decided not to focus on them, I wanted to emphasize the hills behind. I used a lot of actually grays in that painting. In the lower foreground there, the shadows are actually kind of a warm cool, they call it, kind of a violet, warm violet with some gray in it.
Okay.
But,
All right, let's go on to the next.
this is another watercolor on paper, and this was called Three Barns at Cliff Creek Winery, that is.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And another one that could have been finished as a drawing, very careful drawing, and then I put the color on over
right.
it. So,
All right.
yeah.
And let's go on to the next.
This was called, as you might guess, Alleyway. It's an alley in Talent, right, not too far from where I live, off of Culver Road. And if you walk Talent, you might recognize it. And I want to do some oil painting at the other end of that. So that piece was actually executed with water-soluble pencil and regular pencil and watercolor.
All right. Now let's go on to the next.
It's another example of a real detailed drawing underneath the watercolor paper of a barn out in Sam's Valley.
Okay. And let's go on to the next.
This is an older one I did for a watercolor show, the Watercolor Society of Oregon. Similar, except that I did a lot of water-soluble pencil work on this one.
Okay.
So,
all right, let's go on to the next.
Another one, that's a Jacksonville scene with transparent watercolor.
Okay. And let's view up one more.
This is called Lonely Place. It was a very long barn. I did that one. It's off of North Phoenix Road.
Okay.
Watercolor and water-soluble pencil.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And so we got just a couple of minutes left. So what's the general price range for your art?
It runs probably on the average for the galleries, $200 to $4,000.
Okay. And is all the art that you sell, is it all original, or do you do like prints and like some artists also do like gift cards, and they do other products with their art?
Right now I do only originals. I used to do G-clay prints, but just originals now.
All right.
Yeah.
And what's like the general how do people go about finding your work? Is it like currently displayed at local galleries right now?
Locally, I have a show right now. The reception will be April 12th at South Stage Cellars in Jacksonville. Okay. And then in September, early September, I'll have a show at Art Presence. You can go online to lanehalllart.com. Okay. And you can also go on my Facebook page. People can call me. Also, the website has my phone number. Right. And I'm always happy to meet with people and show them work.
And do you take like private commissions?
I do. Absolutely. I do take commissions.
All right.
Absolutely.
And so beyond your official website and your Facebook, do you have any other social media sites right now?
I'm part of LinkedIn, although I don't. I haven't shown any work on LinkedIn. It's just kind of a business partnership there.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So.
Okay. Well, Lane, I very much appreciate your coming on to the show and being able to talk about your work. And so I just thank you and good luck with all your future work. And so thank you.
You're quite welcome. It's been an honor. I appreciate it.
All right. Yeah. Well, we've reached the end of our show, Rogue Artisans and Crafters, and we thank you at home for joining us and learning about our featured artist, Lane Hall. Wish to thank Lane Hall for agreeing to come on to the show to discuss his life as an artist. And so I'm your host, David Glamour Dave Nienow, and we will see you next time, Road Valley. Thank you for watching Rogue Artisans and Crafters. You can watch this show on Tuesday evenings at 8 p.m. and Thursday evenings at 11:30 p.m. on Channel 15 in Ashland and via Charter Cable on Channel 182. You can watch this show on demand at rvtv.sou.edu by searching for Rogue Artisans and Crafters. You can follow our show on Facebook by visiting and liking our show page. Just search for Rogue Artisans and Crafters. You can follow David Glamour Dave Nienow on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Just search for Glamour Dave. If you like this show and wish to support David Glamour Dave Nienow and his show productions, you can visit his Patreon page at patreon.com/glamourdave to become a patron supporter. We want to thank our crew who have made it possible to put this program together, and to thank RVTV for their wonderful studio facility that allows us to produce shows such as this one. If you'd like to become a studio producer and create your own public access show, you can contact RVTV to learn how by calling 541-552-6898.